Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listener want real protection against cyber risk. And I know that High Trust is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59% incident rate, meaning 99.41 stayed breach free.
That's solid. But what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now, with their new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
Then check out the iTrust framework. Go to hightrustalliance.net to learn more. There we go. Welcome, everybody. We're still in London. No, I'm lying. I'm not in London. These guys are. But this is a follow-up conversation of our on-location coverage. It was less than a week ago actually, in London at the Excel Infosecurity Europe 2025. Now I'm in Florence, and I'm reconnected with London again. And with this guy, Rob, he won't leave me alone. I had to interview him twice on location, bringing really cool people. Just kidding. I really enjoy our conversation. I enjoy so much, Rob, that I kick out Sean, and now you're my
No,
co-host. So,
I
hey.
feel honoured. I hope Sean knows about this. I hope we're not cheating on him. I hope that's how it works.
Oh, he knows. He's very happy about it.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah, you're
Good.
good. You're good. No,
Right,
good to
it's
see you
great to
again.
reconnect.
Oh, absolutely, Rob. Always good, and always good to talk about a different angle of cybersecurity. It's not too much IT, and people know me. That's what I do about society and technology. So I love to talk about this kind of things. And for people watching, there's Anthony there, which Rob, you brought it. So you do the honor.
It's your
That's,
fault, Rob.
It's
yeah,
your fault. You deal with it. You deal with
it's
it.
bring your friends to work day, isn't it? No, well, so following on from what we were talking about, perhaps to tear it up a little bit, and then I'll allow Anthony to introduce himself. Yeah, we were talking very much about you need to work effectively across teams and get the best out of people, and I thought when we were having that conversation, there's so much more we could be talking about in that space, and I've been excited in overlapping with Anthony and the company he's been working with or working for, and what they've been producing and what they've been focusing on, because I think this is something that we really need to see more of. So that was why, and I said, Anthony, what are you up to? Are you free? Can we wrestle you away for a little while? And Anthony checked his diary and realised he didn't have anything in his calendar, so we could arrange this. And so Anthony, perhaps now I'll let you do the proper introduction rather than my explanation of how we've ended up dragging you onto a call, really.
Yeah, thanks. I think I've got nothing in my calendar because I'm really no one interesting, I guess. I suppose unusually for a podcast guest, I'm not ex-intelligence agency or ex-big company CISO or superstar researcher or anything. I suppose me, I'm a bit of I'm basically a story nerd. That's what I am. So as a one-time national newspaper journalist, I kind of fell into cybersecurity in the early days, when ransomware was a consumer problem. Not an enterprise problem. And I took my kind of love of stories from being a journalist into cybersecurity, because cybersecurity was a fascinating space, because it's all about spies and criminals and sort of dystopia, the sort of thing that journalists latch onto. And now I sort of apply that love of stories to cybersecurity. So it's a healthy dose of marketing things. I also create and run cyber crisis exercises. I've done that previously. But largely what I do is I help start cybersecurity startups figure out what they should look like and how they take themselves to market and all that kind of interesting stuff. And I'm currently working with a company called Rangeforce, which has a platform that does team exercising and cyber skills for defensive teams, so for SOC teams, blue teams, and I have been in cyber skills for a bunch of years now, working with platforms. So I find it is the most fascinating, interesting space, because technology is largely quite predictable and dry, but humans are a bit crazy, and you can't tell them what to do. They turn up at work hungover, and they're stubborn and stuff like that. And so there's far more color points and interesting things going on in cyber skills. So that's where I sort of spend my time focusing on now, and we've just done some interesting work in kind of soft skills. I think that's where Rob and I have crossed over a fair bit recently.
Yeah, and Rob, you brought Parvi on the conversation when we were there in the press
Yeah, I mean,
room, and I mean that was about bringing different teams, and so we can probably start with that, right?
yeah, absolutely. So, I'll sort of perhaps give you my reason for focusing on it as well. Is so I run a university student competition in focusing on sort of leadership skills and soft skills in cybersecurity. So empowering students who wouldn't otherwise have necessarily seen themselves having a career in cyber because they're not deep technical specialists, to realize that there is such a breadth of careers in cyber, and that the soft skills, or complementary skills as they're often called, are so critical and necessary, particularly as you progress up the ranks in cyber. And you can do your deep technical work, but actually, if you're going to be acting to shape an organization, you need to go out and influence. If you're going to be managing a team, or you're going to be in a team, you need to be able to work effectively and communicate effectively across a team. You might be working on a complex problem together. So how do you understand the uncertainty that you're sharing over different points, and how do you get someone else to appreciate that perspective? So for me, I spend a lot of my time encouraging students to get experience of, practice these development of these soft skills, and to see the value of these soft skills in the industry. So it was through conversations with Anthony that we were saying, we're looking at this going, this is quite cool, because actually this isn't just about improving the individual. This isn't about just focusing on a solo person's technical capability. I want to understand how I can get the best out of my team. Or I think CISOs and heads of cyber threat intelligence teams, or head of SOCs, really have a team effort here, and they really need to bring the best out of them. And actually that brings in a range of additional features and considerations that I think so easily get overlooked when we get distracted by the shiny, snazzy technology focusedness of cyber. And that was what I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. So I once spoke to a CISO who told me that cybersecurity defense, in their perspective, is made up of capabilities, and a capability is basically your ability to address a risk. He said each capability is made up of people, processes, and technology, which we've heard before in cybersecurity. I think in our industry we tend to over-index like heavily on the technology side of things, and so much less on people and probably processes, in my opinion. And I think the challenge that we all have is getting people to see this, and crucially, it kind of comes down to money. Fund it, so fund skills development, team development, etc., rather than just chucking money at technical kind of panaceas. Often, I think to me that's the challenge we kind of have currently, because I think we're in a position, in my opinion, where you can only really make incremental gains now with tools. So for like 20 years, we've been tweaking tools as threats change, and it's kind of a game of who's slightly ahead the whole time. And that's great, but it means, you can only get slightly better the whole time. Soft skills in particular, we've never done any of this. So to me, says there is a huge latent opportunity there for a massive positive change. It's kind of a weapon sitting in the corner of a warehouse with the canvas on it, just waiting to be deployed. And I think the more conversations like this that we can have about how can we understand soft skills better, how can we measure them more, how can we write them down, name them, figure out what they are and how they're used in incident response, the better, the more we can use them as that weapon that they can be.
Yeah. And I think that when I talk about educating the general public, the kids, the parents, the grandparents, I mean, people that are not in the cybersecurity industry, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, I know we're talking about training corporate here and team, but we're still human. We all react to those DNA and instinct, like prehistoric instinct. That's how social engineering is so successful, because we're still like following the fears and the alert, and heartbeat goes up and we kind of freak out, and then we're more vulnerable. That's always been technology. I think it can help a lot in alerting us that something may be going on, but ultimately we're the one that has to make that last decision. And I remember years ago when I started in cybersecurity too, coming completely from a different field, I was kind of thrown away by cybersecurity is going to really be good, and our goal is to not be present, like that people shouldn't even see that cybersecurity exists. And I thought it was a bad thing, like really trusting technology a little bit too much. And now we're back to say, well, maybe first we need the human that is trained and then use the freaking tool. Not like, otherwise it's a self-driving car. If we're still driving the car, we need to pay attention.
But I think that to me is absolutely critical. So we're ultimately talking about human machine teaming, and that's the buzzword of today. But it's fundamental. If you're going to trust and rely on technology in any capacity, you've also got the challenges of trusting and relying on that technology to help you with your decision making. And one of the things I'd also like to draw is Anthony talked about his experiences being in stories, and how and I'm hearing that so much more in cyber now, the narrative,
and I
how you
love
need to
that.
communicate. And I think this is so powerful. Any situation you're in, we'll need to understand our own biases. We need to understand when we're looking at data and we're not looking at it in the neutral way, what we're missing, or whether we're leaning on one set of data or not. And that could be from a particular bias to a preference in technology. So I only like this type of technology, so I look there and I don't look there. And one of the areas that I've had lots of interest in is looking at how you upskill people and how you transfer knowledge from an expert to a beginner. And that's a really interesting challenge for people. And if you can crack it, the military have spent years trying to crack it, for even focusing on language learning. If you can upskill someone to become a native or natural language speaker, you can save so much money if you can work out how to do that quickly. Just for one example, now you can apply that to a fighter jet pilot. You could apply it to a cyber operator. How do you convey knowledge and expertise to someone who isn't an expert? That is often through narrative and story, and that's some of the best ways we learn as social animals. We learn through storytelling, and that's been the core of humanity. And I think there's some really interesting bits that we can now do in terms of looking at how teams work together, how they communicate with each other, what they're sharing, how they're sharing, and turn it from an anecdotal approach to being a much more rigorous and scientific way of enhancing skills. And that's the future for me. I think there's a really exciting space in that space. And there's been some really interesting work in other disciplines and other fields. But now I think we're seeing it move into cyber in this, and this is what's exciting.
I couldn't agree more about communication. A big part of our work at Range Force in the early days was to figure out what problem people have, because that helps you figure out the narrative that you take to market, which is essentially my job. So in doing that, we spent a lot of time sitting down with SOC leaders, teams, CISOs, etc. We asked them what they were struggling with, in particular when it came to skills and people. And we heard, they talked a lot about the need for technical skills, which is clear and, absolutely correct. The thing that kept cropping up was soft skills. And when they talked about soft skills, when we kind of pushed them a little bit more, so, what exactly is a soft skill? They always would say communication. Communication is one thing that was front of mind, especially in the space we're in, which is kind of instant response. How do you string your team together by telling them, by setting an objective clearly, allocating tasks clearly. Once you're in an incident, reconfiguring where people are looking, etc., all of that stuff. I think also the other thing that was interesting we found out about that process is once you really try and dig down, and I think communication is one great soft skill. The other thing I think is a great soft skill is asking the right questions. So we'd ask them really sort of strong questions, fundamental questions like, what are soft skills? How do you build them? How do you measure them? No one had a strong answer. And I think it was there that we kind of started thinking, right, there's really something here. There is a deep misunderstood or granular problem that no one has actually kind of put their finger on how you address it. And because when we were also talking with those people, they would not talk about soft skills as being a tactical thing that they would use occasionally, but they would talk about soft skills as a big kind of strategic change thing that could actually bring real benefit to them. And that
I'd
was
like to
really
start with stop calling them soft skills.
Yeah, I hate that.
Right? Because
yeah.
it's already like, no, dude, no. That's how Homo sapiens evolved over everything. Because communication is not because the technology, it's not that, the spear, it helped, but it was more like envisioning scenario, making plans, reacting as a team. To go back to this, it's like, these are not soft skills. These are our best skills that we have as human.
It's one of the, so you know, I say we teach, or we run a competition that encourages, we've called them leadership skills and soft skills, because no one understands when we say human-centric skills, but we're talking about human-centric skills. If you look at the latest cybersecurity market report that gets produced for the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, they call them complementary skills. And they are complementary skills, but they're not complementary, they're critical and core. And so you've actually got to, that's one of the problems I think we face straight away, is that we don't associate these as critically of value as a core component of whatever role. They just happen to be universal skills. So perhaps we should call them universal skills. But yeah, both soft and complementary skills, or that definition drives me absolutely mad.
I totally agree with you. The other one we've tried to call them is teamwork, but teamwork is too all encapsulating. I think that comes from the fact that in cybersecurity in particular, people trust things that they know. You know, tools generate reports, you can track performance endlessly. People have visibility, like they feel in control. With skills or soft skills, it's far less so. You can't see it, you can't write it down, you can't score it. It's a completely intangible thing, and it kind of bamboozles people's brain to even start thinking about, you know, what each of those are, and then how do you fix them? How do you touch them, grab them, write them down, and use them to make a difference to something really tangible, which is in an incident when the alarms are going off and there's a sweat on the CISO's brow, and there's like the massive gulf between those two things, and that's why we started. That was kind of our start place for putting together this thing that we've built recently, which is a framework which tries to start doing that we worked on with a really clever lady called Becca McKeown, who is a military and cyber psychologist, which is a bit tabloid, which is probably why I like it so much. But she basically works with kind of special forces teams and infantry teams, and looks at how they operate in really demanding, difficult environments, and how they can essentially become better teams. And that's largely through exercising. And I just dumped all of this on her desk and said, this is a thing. We're sure it's a thing. How do you make it tangible? And so she's put them into a framework which actually we believe is like the beginnings of starting to allow people to like touch them and call them out and see each soft skill for what it is and score it, etc. But I think that is largely the problem, is you can't, they're just so intangible that people stop thinking. Your brain shuts down once you start trying to count them, essentially.
I've always brought in, and I think that was one of the reasons I really liked the conversation we were having actually on this work and the work that Beck was doing. But for me, it's, the philosophy of marginal gains was very much used by the British Olympic community to really improve take a holistic approach to our entire program and make sure we were making improvements in every aspect, not just in the technology, but in the diets the athletes were having, in the training programs they were having, in the psychological support they were having to build more resilience. And they looked across the board holistically and said, right, where can we make those marginal gains, because they all add up. And this is what I'm kind of really encouraging in cyber is, yes, we can focus on the technology. Yes, we can buy the latest new kit and that will give you X amount. But if we look at the problem as a whole, we can make some substantial, not just marginal gains, by focusing on the effectiveness of team, building the resilience of teams. We've talked about burnout. I was chatting just yesterday to a team and it was fascinating. Head of a CTI team and a SOC, and he rotates his threat analyst and his SOC analyst through the roles. They do a certain amount of time, several months in role, and then they switch. Because he said, look, I want my guys to understand what's out there, and then I want them to play what they're defending against, and then I want them to have the other perspective. And I asked him where he got this thing. He said, well, actually, previously used to be in law enforcement. This is one of the techniques we did in law enforcement, and I'm now bringing it through to cyber. And I'm going to enhance what we're doing as standard by doing it this way. We'll get some evaluation and see if it works, but we're going to make that tweak and see it works. But very much focusing on how I can get the best out of my individuals, working together, understanding each other better, and therefore working towards a common mission together. And that was again what we were touching on last week, Marco. And I thought, at the heart of that is soft skills, effective communications, critical thinking, understanding the problem together and understanding each other's perspective on the problem all fits into this space. And if we can get this right for our incident response teams, we're going to see, I think, a considerable improvement into how we deal with incidents. And then if we get it right in our broader teams, we're going to have enabled that behavior change that we need and that we keep on pushing for. So for me, it really does unlock so much potential. And it's great to see that this is becoming a topic that people are actually beginning to consider, and CISOs are looking at, how do I build the right team in the right way? How do I exercise them in the right way? How do I make sure they're working effectively in advance of the time we need? And for me, this is absolutely core.
Yeah. So, and Anthony, before we start talking, recording, we were talking about how the approach of the practice, like, you don't want to find yourself dealing with an emergency without training and without being prepared. But I also think when it applies to the team, it goes to, in the team, each one, maybe 2, 3 of them. I think in a soccer team or any other sport team, Rob, you went there, like not everybody play defense, otherwise nobody's going to score, right? Or not everybody play offense. You got to know how you work together as a team, and knowing that that's not my best skills, but I know what can expect when the other person come into play. So I'm imagine, Anthony, when people practice, they and simulate, they need to have if they can have a vision of what the other people are doing. You're not alone facing the threats.
Yeah, and the beauty of exercise is it does it in a safe environment. It does it in a de-risk way. So it is not a problem if you mess up, if you do something wrong. You're not going to drag down your factory's operations. You're not going to cause the share price to crash. You just learn from a thing that you did. And that is the absolute beauty of exercising. We say that the first time that your team runs through an incident, it shouldn't be when it's real, when it's live,
Mm-hmm.
when everything is on the line. Because let's be honest, like businesses have been dragged onto the front lines of a far bigger conflict. More of them are getting hit nowadays. And there is greater importance placed on the attacks that you see nowadays. So why put your team under that stress and pressure when you can, to use Rebecca, our psychologist's word, like you can inoculate them in advance of all of that stress? And there are a few things that you can do in advance, and also like during an incident. She talks about why it's great to take a break, take a step back, recalibrate, check the things that you're doing are right, learn from what you're doing, and then kind of share information, refocus tasks, clarify people's roles. And even I think there's a kind of neurochemical thing going on there, whereby there's lots of adrenaline charging around your brain, and actually that is quite unhelpful sometimes, because that can, what's it called, cognitive narrowing, I think she's talked about it, where it pushes you down into a channel and you can only see one thing, and that's the body's way of blocking out other things and getting you to focus on stuff. But actually that can be unuseful in something as broad and kind of granular as when you're defending in a massive enterprise environment, because you need to not just be chasing down certain rabbit holes, but you need to be taking into account a much wider set of things. Say, for example, when you're threat hunting, if you go deep into a couple of areas where you expect to find kind of IOCs, etc., you miss all of the other stuff.
You get into a tunnel vision, right?
Exactly, tunnel vision. You've hit it on the head. That is absolutely perfect. So again, simple things, just taking a step back, reducing the adrenaline, and talking and helping each other deal with stress, and then going again. And that's, resilience is a big part of the crew framework that we put together. Resilience is stress management, conflict resolution, and then recovery. So how you move forward from a stressful situation. So I find all of this stuff absolutely fascinating, and I would hope it's not just a pet project, but I truly believe that it can have so much more value in risk reduction more broadly, which is why we kind of worked on categorizing some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. And as we're wrapping, I could talk about this for a long time, and maybe we'll come back. Rob, one thing that I keep thinking is this gaming approach, because it's the tabletop exercise, is the simulation, and I'm thinking like we need again. I like to go on the everyday user too. Like as you apply, Anthony, this to the team, the work in cybersecurity, and then we can apply that to train people that are not in cybersecurity, but you prepare them to be aware. I'm thinking like, well, what about a nice video game where kids and people, they can practice how they react to a phishing attempt or a fake video or social engineering or anything like that. When again, if it happened for the first time, you have no idea what it is. You're gonna freak out, and you're very vulnerable to social engineers. That's what they want from you. They want you to freak out, right? But if you've done that before, even in a simulation, that's pretty cool.
And again, I'd add to that, one word that we haven't mentioned, but I think is equally critical in resilience is trust, and particularly trust in a team. So you know what you're getting from each member of the team.
Yep.
And you can only do that through communicating with each other, working with each other, having that experience in a safe play environment where when the rubber hits the road and you're up against it, you're not dealing with multi-million-pound losses because your company shut down. You're dealing with, try again, practice, get it right, no judgment. That's what we're here for. That's what we're learning. And there's so much from the field of, pilot training that I think, and aircraft security, airline security that we can take, and feed into this. There's been loads of work looking at effectiveness of military decision-making teams and teams in the military and how you get information flow. There's been a chap looking at firemen and how firemen, and Professor Gary Klein talks about how firemen train each other up. And again, how do they impart knowledge from one member to the other member in a team? How do they make collective decisions when in a burning building, when they need to rely on each other, matter of life or death? You need to do that in a training space well before that happens for real. And again, I think with these immersive capabilities with technology, there's so much more we can be doing. And the only other thing I'd bring back to, which is the old military, the 6 Ps of military planning. Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance. And I think that's so true. So the more we can put into the space with teams doing it together, the better we're going to have in terms of their improvement. And as we broaden that out, the better we can enhance our capabilities, not just relying on the tech to do the job for us, which is where we started.
No. I want to just finish with the storytelling part. I mean, I think, like Anthony, when you say you're coming from journalism and telling stories, it's one crucial thing to do. It's like even in the gaming simulation, you're using storytelling to create the situation. And now, Rob, we do have the technology to really do it with virtual reality and real simulation. But before, we used to do it by telling a story, learning a moral. What do? Don't go in the wood, right? don't pay attention to the wolf. And that was, Anton, that was storytelling. That's how we still learn as a society, from stories. Yep. Unfortunately, too many now, we don't even know if they're real or not, but that's a story for another podcast.
Another topic.
Yeah, another topic. Well, I'm glad, Rob, that you joined me for this. And Anthony, I hope you come back again and we can keep chatting about these or other topics.
Thanks for having me.
Even storytelling. I'd love to talk about that too. And for everybody listening, this is still an on-location leftover from Infosecurity Europe 2025. But, we're getting ready for Black Hats. So I don't know who is going to be there, but I will be in August in Las Vegas. So that's our next event on location with me and Sean. I think I will let Sean come back for that, unless Rob, you want to join us in Las Vegas.
I don't get the Vegas ticket. Great.
All right.
that's probably wise, knowing you, Rob, to be honest.
All right, let's not go there. Anthony, thank you so much. Rob, see you later. Everybody stay tuned, subscribe, stay with us, ITSP
Thank
Magazine.
You.
See ya. Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listener want real protection against cyber risk. And I know that HITRUST is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59% incident rate, meaning 99.41 stayed breach-free.
That's solid. But what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now with their new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
Then check out the HITRUST framework. Go to hitrustalliance.net to learn more.